I told her I was just a retired school teacher living off a pension. And that one small lie, if you can even call it that, turned out to be the only thing standing between me and losing everything I'd spent 63 years building. I want to tell you exactly how it happened, because if you're out there right now, maybe thinking about opening your heart again after loss, after grief, after years of lonely Sunday mornings, I want you to hear this first. My wife passed in the spring, 3 years before any of this. Lung cancer. She fought for 14 months, and she never once stopped being the most dignified woman I'd ever known. We'd been married 31 years, and I'm not ashamed to tell you that when she passed, I didn't know how to be a person anymore. I didn't know how to cook, didn't know how to sit in a quiet house, didn't know how to go to church and sit in the pew we'd shared for decades, and not feel like half of me was just gone. My daughter kept calling. Every other day, sometimes every day. She lives about 40 minutes from me, in Decatur. And she'd drive out on weekends, just to make sure I'd eaten something that wasn't crackers. She's always been like that. Practical. Watchful. The kind of person who notices when something's wrong before you even say a word. My oldest friend, we go back to high school, we were on the same football team. In 1978, he started calling more too. He'd come over and we'd sit on my porch and talk about nothing. Sports, the neighborhood, old stories we'd told 100 times. He never tried to fix anything. He just showed up, and that meant more than I can say. But loneliness has a way of sitting in your chest like a stone, and after a while you get tired of carrying it. I own a small cattle ranch, about 240 acres outside of Abilene, Texas. My late wife and I bought the first 80 acres back in 1994, when land out there was still something two people on a teacher's salary and a nurse's salary could afford if they saved long enough. We added parcels over the years. Built it up slow and careful, the way you do when every dollar means something. By the time she passed, the ranch was paid off, and the cattle operation was turning a modest but steady profit. Nothing flashy, just something real. I also own the small house in town where I stay during the week. Easier for errands, doctor's appointments, that kind of thing. The ranch house is 30 minutes out, and I still go there on weekends. Still feel close to her out there, if I'm honest. Nobody outside my family and my attorney knew the full picture of what I had. That was always my rule. Even before any of this happened, my late wife believed the same way. She used to say, "People treat you different when they know what you're worth, and not all of that different is good." She was right about most things. I met the woman who would become my wife at a church fundraiser in the fall. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those October days in Texas that finally cools down enough to remind you that fall is actually coming. The church was raising money for the youth outreach program, and somebody had organized a fish fry and a silent auction. I'd volunteered to help set up tables because my daughter had signed me up without asking me first, which is something she does, and I'd shown up grumbling and ended up staying all afternoon. She was seated at the registration table. Her name was Rochelle. She was 58 years old, she told me later, and she'd moved to Abilene from Dallas after a divorce that she described as long overdue. She was well dressed without being showy about it. She laughed easily. She asked me questions and actually listened to the answers, which, when you've been lonely for a while, feels like someone handing you a glass of water in a desert. We talked for almost 2 hours that afternoon. I told her I was retired, which was true. I didn't tell her about the ranch or the cattle or the property in town. I told her I'd been a history teacher at the high school for 28 years, which was also true, and that I lived simply now on my pension and some savings. She seemed comfortable with that, didn't flinch, didn't seem less interested. I drove home that evening feeling something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Not exactly happiness. Something more like a window opening. We started seeing each other in November. Dinners in town. Mostly. A movie once. We went to a jazz concert at the Civic Center in December, and she held my arm walking in from the cold parking lot, and I remember thinking, this is nice. This is a nice thing. My daughter met her once, in January, when she came by the house in town while Rochelle happened to be there. They were polite with each other, cordial, but on the drive back home, my daughter called me from her car. Daddy, she said, I don't want to overstep. But, I said, I just want you to be careful. That's all. I don't know her. You don't know her that well either. I want you to be careful. I told her I appreciated that. I told her I was a grown man and I'd been careful my whole life. She said she knew that. She said she loved me. And then we hung up, and I sat with her words for a little while before I let myself set them aside. My oldest friend said something similar a week later, more blunt about it, because that's how he's always been. You known her 3 months, he said. You thinking about marrying her after 3 months? I'm thinking about it, I said. Has she asked you for anything? I said no. He looked at me for a long moment. Give it time, he said. That's all I'm saying. Give it time. I gave it 3 more months, and then I proposed. We got married in May at the courthouse. Simple ceremony, just the 2 of us and 2 witnesses, a couple from the church who agreed to come. My daughter came too at my request. She stood beside me and smiled in all the photographs. And I know that smile cost her something, and I have never forgotten that. Rochelle moved some of her things into my house in town that same afternoon. We sat on the back porch that evening and watched the sun go down over the neighbor's roof. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like I had something to look forward to in the mornings. That feeling lasted about 60 hours. It started on the 3rd day, Monday morning. We'd had a quiet Sunday. She'd made breakfast. We'd watched some television. I'd gone out back to do a few things in the yard. Nothing unusual. I went to bed that night thinking that maybe, just maybe, this was going to be all right. Monday morning I came downstairs and she was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her phone. She looked up when I came in. She was smiling, but there was something different in that smile, something purposeful. Morning, she said. Sleep okay? I said I had. I was thinking, she said, we should probably talk about the financial setup, how things are arranged, so I know how to plan. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat down across from her. I kept my voice easy. What do you mean, plan? Well, she said, I gave up my apartment in Dallas. I don't have income coming in right now. I want to make sure I understand what we are working with, so I can help manage things. I said, I've been managing things on my own just fine. I appreciate the thought. She nodded, but the smile stayed fixed. Of course, I just think married couples should have a full picture, full transparency, so there are no surprises. No surprises, I repeated. Right, she said. So, what does your pension come out to? And do you have retirement accounts, any property? I set my coffee cup down, and I said, very calmly, because my heart was beating in a way that told me to stay calm. I'm a retired school teacher from a public school district. My pension is modest. I've got a little in savings. The house here I rent month to month. All of which were things I had let her believe from the beginning. None of it was technically untrue, except the last part. She looked at me. Something shifted behind her eyes. It was quick. She smoothed it over fast. But I saw it. That's it, she said. That's it, I said. She picked up her coffee. She looked out the window and she said, well, that's not quite what I was expecting. And there it was, right there on the table between us, plain as the morning light. I didn't say anything. I let the silence sit and then I said, what were you expecting? She laughed, a short, careful laugh. Nothing. I thought there might be more to work with. That's all. More to work with, I said slowly. For our future, she added quickly. For retirement planning, investments. I have some ideas about Rochelle, I said. It's been 3 days. She smiled again, but this time it didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. Of course, we have time. We'll figure it all out. We moved through the rest of that morning like two people trying not to step on each other's feet in a small room. She made lunch. We ate mostly in silence. In the afternoon, she got a call and went to the bedroom and closed the door and spoke in a low voice for about 20 minutes. I sat in the living room and I thought about my daughter's face at that courthouse. I thought about my friend sitting on my porch, asking whether she'd asked me for anything yet. I thought about my late wife, who used to say that your gut knows things before your head catches up. My gut was talking loud now. That evening I called my attorney. He's handled my affairs for 17 years. He's the kind of man who's seen enough to not be easily surprised. And when I told him what had happened, the conversation, the questions, the sudden interest in what we were working with 72 hours into the marriage, he was quiet for a moment. "Did you disclose any of the property?" he asked. "No," I said. "She believes I'm a retired teacher living on a pension." "Good," he said. "Keep it that way. Don't sign anything. Don't add her to any accounts. Come see me this week." I said I would. The following morning she brought it up again, this time with a different angle. She'd been doing some thinking, she said. She felt it would be practical, smart even, for me to add her to my bank account, just for ease of access, just so she could help manage day-to-day expenses while she got herself situated. I said I'd think about it. She pressed a little, said that in a real partnership finances should be shared, said that her first husband had kept everything separate and it had always felt like a sign of distrust, and she didn't want us to start out that way. I said, "You moved in 3 days ago," she said, "and we're married. That changes things." That afternoon her son called. I hadn't met him yet. She'd mentioned him in passing, said he was 29 and living in Fort Worth, between jobs, trying to figure things out. She took the call on the back porch, and I wasn't trying to listen, but the house is small, and voices carry through screen doors. "He's not sitting on as much as I thought," I heard her say. "Yeah, pension and savings. I know, let me work on it." I stood in the kitchen with a dish towel in my hand, and something went very cold and very still inside me. I didn't react, I didn't walk out there. I folded the dish towel, set it on the counter, and I went and sat down in the armchair that used to be my wife's chair. The one my daughter keeps telling me I should get reupholstered. And I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be in this moment. I thought about what my late wife would have said. She was not a woman who believed in making scenes. She believed in clear eyes and steady hands, and knowing when something was done. This was done. I called my daughter that evening, after Rochelle had gone to bed. I told her everything. The questions on day 1. The request for joint accounts on day 2. The phone call I'd overheard. My daughter was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Daddy," she finally said. "What do you need?" I said. "I need you to come Saturday and be here when I have a conversation." She said, "I'll be there." I called my attorney the next morning. He'd already done some checking. That's the kind of man he is. He told me some things about Rochelle's history that I am not going to share in detail because they're not mine to share fully. But I will tell you this. The divorce she'd described as long overdue had involved significant financial claims that had not gone her way, and the address she'd given me in Dallas, the apartment she said she'd given up to move here, had not been her primary residence for at least 8 months prior to our wedding. I absorbed that information. I thanked him. I said I'd see him that week, and we made a plan. On Saturday morning, my daughter arrived early. She came in through the back door, the way she always does, and she hugged me for a long time and didn't say anything. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and she poured herself a cup of coffee, and she waited. Rochelle came downstairs about 20 minutes later. She seemed surprised to see my daughter there, but she recovered quickly. She was good at that. She smiled, said good morning, said she'd make some more coffee. I said, "Come sit down. I have some things I want to say." Something in my voice must have changed, because the smile she was wearing shifted into something more careful. She sat down across from me. I said, "I've been doing some thinking about our situation, about where things stand." She said, "Of course. I've been thinking too. I actually found a financial advisor I think we should." "Rochelle," I said, "I heard your conversation on the back porch the other night." The room went very quiet. She started to say something, started to form the shape of a denial, and I held up my hand very gently. "I don't want to have an argument," I said. "I'm 63 years old. I don't have the energy for arguments, and I don't think they'd help either of us. I just want to be clear about some things." She looked at my daughter. My daughter looked back at her with a face that revealed absolutely nothing. "I'm not what you thought I was," I said. "Or maybe more accurately, I'm not as little as you thought I was. But that's not the point anymore. The point is that I know what I heard, and I know what's been happening since the day we came home from that courthouse. And I think we both know that this isn't going to work." She sat with that for a moment, and then the careful face fell away and she looked, not angry, exactly, more calculating, more like she was running numbers in her head, seeing what the landscape looked like from here. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" she said. "My attorney is already working on it," I said. "Given the timeline and the circumstances, he's advised me that an annulment may be the cleaner path. We'll see." She looked at my daughter. "You knew about this?" My daughter said simply, "I know about it now." Rochelle looked back at me. "And the house? I've been staying here. I moved here. You've been here 10 days, I said. You'll have time to arrange your things. I'd ask that you be moved out by the end of next week. I'll cover the cost of a hotel for 2 weeks while you sort yourself out. That's more than fair." "That's generous," my daughter said very evenly. I could see her recalculating. I could see her deciding whether to push. There was a long moment where it could have gone a number of ways, and then she seemed to settle on something, and she nodded and she said, "I'll need more than 2 weeks." "You'll have 2 weeks," I said, "and I'll be respectful. I'll be decent. But I need you to understand that I know what I know, and there is nothing more to negotiate here." She left the table. She went upstairs. I could hear her moving around up there, drawers opening and closing. My daughter reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "You okay, Daddy?" she said. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." She moved out in 11 days. She didn't say much to me in those 11 days. We were civil. We passed each other in the hallway. I made sure there was food in the house and that she had what she needed. I am not someone who believes in cruelty, even when cruelty might feel justified. But I also didn't apologize, and I didn't waver, and I didn't let myself be talked into any softer version of what needed to happen. The annulment was granted 3 months later. My attorney handled it without drama. Rochelle had retained someone of her own, but given the short duration and the documentation my attorney had put together, the timeline, the overheard conversation I had made careful notes as about, her financial history, there was not much ground to fight over. She walked away with nothing that was mine, which is exactly as it should be. My oldest friend came over the evening it was finalized. He brought a bottle of decent bourbon, and we sat on the porch until it got late and the stars were fully out over the neighborhood. He poured us each a glass and didn't say, "I told you so," which is one of the things I've always respected about him. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Stupid," I said, for a little while, and then I stopped feeling stupid because I made the right calls when it counted, and that's all you can do. He nodded. "She got nothing," I said. "Good," he said. We sat there a while longer. A car went by on the street. A dog barked somewhere in the next block. The bourbon was good, and the night was warm, and I thought about my late wife, and I thought about my daughter, and I thought about this old friend beside me. And I felt not happy exactly, but something honest. Here is what I want to say, because I know some of you listening have been in a version of this. Maybe not this exact version, but some version of it. You've been alone after a loss, and someone came along who felt like air coming back into the room, and maybe your gut told you something was off, and you wanted so badly for it to be wrong that you almost let yourself believe it was. Listen to that voice, please, especially when you're lonely, especially when it's been a long time. That voice is not cruelty, and it is not cynicism. It is hard-won knowledge from every year you've lived, and it deserves to be heard. I am 63 years old. I own land and cattle, and a house in town that I've maintained for decades without cutting corners. None of that happened by accident. It happened because I paid attention, because I asked the right questions, because I knew that trust, real trust, is something that builds slow. It is not something someone can demand of you 3 days after a courthouse ceremony. I am not closed to love. I want to be clear about that. I still believe in it. I believe that there are people out there who come to you honestly, who want a real partnership, who understand that building a life together means starting small and growing something carefully. I have not given up on that, but I am done with hurry. I am done with being so grateful for warmth that I forget to check whether the heat is real. My daughter drove out to the ranch with me the weekend after everything was finalized. We rode the property in the old truck, the same way I used to do with her when she was small. She'd sit in the passenger seat and ask me questions about the cattle, about the land, about how it all worked, and I'd try to explain things in a way that a child could hold on to. That Saturday, she asked me, "Daddy, are you going to be all right?" And I said what I always say when she asks me something real. "I'm going to be fine. I just need some time and some quiet." She nodded. We drove out to the far end of the property, where there's a rise you can see for about 8 miles on a clear day. We sat up there for a while and didn't say much. The wind was moving through the grass, and the sky was the color it gets in Texas in the late afternoon. Something between gold and bronze that I have never been able to adequately describe to anyone who hasn't seen it. My late wife loved that spot. I let myself sit with that. I let myself miss her, which is something I don't always allow during the busy parts of my days. I let it be what it was. Grief and beauty sitting side by side, which is usually how they come. And then I drove us back to the ranch house, and my daughter made dinner, and we ate on the porch as the dark came in, and for the first time in a while, I felt like myself again. I don't know what comes next for me. I don't know if there's another person out there I'll share my life with. I've stopped trying to know. What I know is this: I have land I worked for. I have family that loves me for the right reasons. I have a friend who shows up. I have an attorney I trust. And I have the knowledge, hard-earned and worth keeping, that when my gut speaks, I need to listen. That's enough to build on. For now, that is more than enough.